What is the most OP build for Lorenz in Fire Emblem 3 Hopes? Lorenz is scary strong. I honestly didn't think I would find another character that is almost as strong as Lysithea. Not only does Lorenz have pure power in his corner, but he also has defense, and I'm not talking about the stat kind. I present to you Lorenz the Iron Wall. Our class of choice for this build is Dark Knight. I tested this on a few different classes that I thought would do well, like Mortal Savant and Holy Knight, etc. Although there are different routes for him to take, Dark Knight is by far the strongest class you could choose for him. Our weapon of choice is actually going to be a normal weapon today. The last 10 videos have been all about the relics, but today we go back to our roots with the Lance of Zoltan. Honestly, you could choose any normal weapon. What's important is you find the abilities Boost Combat Art / Magic and Boost Critical Level 3. The Boost Combat Art / Magic will give us a big boost to our spell damage, and it just so happens that that very spell damage is what makes Lorenz so devastating. Boost Critical Level 3 is just as important so we can have a high crit chance on those very, very powerful spells of ours. As for our accessory, run either a Slepius or a Mage Staff. What we really need is Expert Wizardry. Our battalion is going to be Resist Cavalry, mainly for the same reason we often go this route. Most of the enemies in the endgame will be on horseback, so this gives us a very useful damage advantage. Today's spells of choice are Bolganun and Ragnarok. Lorenz has the ability to buff the crap out of his fire elemental spells, giving Bolganun and Ragnarok a lot, and I mean a lot, of damage potential. With that being said, there is a third spell you can go for. If you are a fan of Hades, you could swap Hades out with Bolganun. I was originally going to do this, but when trying to teach Lorenz Hades and Bolganun, I learned Bolganun after 40 minutes and still didn't learn Hades after 2 hours. I ultimately decided it wasn't worth the time commitment. To teach these spells to Lorenz, I used Monica. As far as Lorenz's uniques go, Rondo of Roses is what gives him the name the Iron Wall. This ability fills while we attack our enemies. If we get hit by an attack, it decreases the gauge a bit, but completely nullifies the damage. When the gauge is full, we can activate it to pull our foes onto our location from a far distance. However, you're not going to want to activate it for that. What you want to do is leave it be as a nullifying shield of sorts. Since it charges so quickly, oftentimes you could just overextend with combos and whatnot, and if you get hit, you'll charge it back before you get hit a second time. This makes it very difficult for enemies to do damage to you. Distinguished House greatly increases the Awakening Gauge fill rate when a battalion is deployed. This is a big boost to our Awakening Gauge fill rate. Noble Duty increases our damage dealt by 50% when ordered to guard, and we have 3 class uniques. Black Magic increases the damage of all of our normal spells, in this case, our fire, while Dark Magic does the same thing but for dark spells. And Sword Buster increases our damage against swords by 95%. As for our abilities, as usual, watch till the end to see where I got each one. Lance Prowess increases our damage by 30% while wielding a lance, while Abandon greatly increases our damage even further, but at the cost of greatly increasing damage received. Lucky for us, we rarely get a chance to see that damage in action. Offensive Tactics increases our damage by another 20% as long as our battalion is still active. Essence of Fire essentially transforms our fire elemental combat arts, magic, strong attacks, and glass actions into a much more powerful variant. This gives us yet another big boost in damage. Big Game Hunter increases damage dealt to enemy commanders, which is yet again another big damage boost for us. Proficient Wit Strike makes it so all of our damage is based on our magic stat. Proficient Wit Strike is a very powerful ability, especially if we build our character's magic stat, but there's actually a second reason for using this. I recently found out that Wit Strike does indeed cause your damage to be defended by the resistance stat, since it effectively turns all of your attacks into magical ones. This means there are only a few classes in the game that have a decent way to defend against you, since it's much more popular for a class to boost defense over resistance. This effectively means the only enemies that will be tanky towards you are mages, which are pretty weak health-wise as it is, and both Dark Knights and Holy Knights. But guess what? Our battalion gives us a damage advantage against them. This is the true power behind Proficient Wit Strike. Battle Instinct fills both our Warrior and Awakening gauges at a faster rate until one of them is completely full. Burst of Resolve restores some of that Awakening gauge each time we crit. This is one of the reasons we went with crit level 3 on our weapon. Then we have Boost Critical to boost that crit even further. And finally Absorb Dexterity, which gives us a boost to our Dex stat every time we defeat an enemy commander. This boost lasts for the entire battle, effectively increasing our crit and our critical rushes as the battle drags on. As for our stats, the most important ones are Magic and Dex, Speed as a secondary. So with that being said, what you want to do is level Lorenz as 2 different classes. We want to do 80 levels as a Gremory and 40 levels as a Trickster. Try to keep an eye on your magic as you level Lorenz. If you notice your magic stat gets close to 110 before your 80 levels of Gremory, swap to Trickster for the remaining levels. So as such, if you want to use stat items on him, max out his magic, and feel free to boost his dex to over 100 if it's not already there. Our combat loop for this build is simple and satisfying. You run into battle casting your uber powerful fire magic, and most of the time this will completely wipe the field. If that wasn't enough, our combos as a Dark Knight are super strong. It doesn't matter which ones you use, you're gonna have the ability to not only do devastating damage, but you can shred stun gauges like no tomorrow. If you notice either your warrior gauge or awakening gauge are filled, use whatever warrior specials you have to get some fast defeats on enemy commanders, then activate your awakening, effectively turning you to an even greater monster than before. Normally, if you're trying to level a character up on maddening, enemies hit you pretty hard. Lorenz, however, has the ability to just deflect all the attacks that come your way. As long as you're always chaining your spells and combos together, you will find that you can charge your unique ability faster than the enemy can damage it. This is even true at the end of the Gatekeeper Paralog on maddening difficulty, against the super powered up versions of the House Leaders. As for our learned abilities, Lance Prowess is from Soldier, Cavalier, and Paladin. Wild Abandon from Brigand, Offensive Tactics from Wyvern Rider, Essence of Fire is from Warlock, Big Game Hunter and Proficient Wit Strike from Mortal Savan, Battle Instinct from Bow Knight, Burst of Resolve from Trickster, Boost Critical from Paladin, and Absorb Dexterity from Dark Bishop. We got Ragnarok from Warlock, and for Bolganun and Hades, depending on which one you choose, is learned by teaching it from Monica. If you enjoyed today's video, drop a like and subscribe for more builds like this. Let me know what character you want to see next.